Okay, I mentioned I will do a commentary on the two aquariums, and before doing the comments, I would like to say that one of my fears is that the difference we'll be talking about, that I'll inflate the differences because of actually that I'm quite interested in the design of filtration systems for coral reef aquariums. So I don't want to inflate them, because at the end of the day, I think the end result for a display area will be the same. I researched and looked at the webpage of the two companies, and were able to borrow or extract these two figures on the layout. And if we start with looking at the the inlet and the return to the filter compartment, both have a surface skimmer. Now what you want to do with the surface skimmer, it is actually to get, typically you get a non-water dissolvable protein film on top of your surface in the aquarium, and this you want to get out into the filter compartment so you can filter out this material or these substances. Partly because it's inhibiting the light transmission to the surface, so you're losing efficiency on your reef light, and secondly, it's also that you want these substances to be degraded, or even better, with a surface with a protein skimmer to have them removed to the skimmer top. The Red Sea has a wider surface skimmer, and I kind of like that, because that will make your life a little bit easier to get rid of the protein film. You have a bigger intake to take it out. But the surface skimmer over the water box, I think it'll work as well. The return, but then going to actually on the return is on the right side. Yeah, they're quite similar. Surface skimmer on the left and return on the right. The return on the water box, actually, they have a return placed quite high, and I kind of like that, because you typically get a quite strong water jet out of that one, and you don't want to impinge that on any corals. So top right corner, typically you don't place a coral there, and then you can also use that jet to agitate or create some turbulence on the surface, and also direct the flow so that the protein film goes into the surface skimmer. So I think that that's really good placement of the return. Going to the Red Sea, they pulled it down where actually you could have the risk of it coming in close proximity to some of your corals. So you need to consider that when you do your aquascaping. But I think the case of the Red Sea, why they pull it down, is to create space so they can fit their automatic top-off unit. And I think this automatic top-off unit is quite clever, because first you want to sense the level in the compartment where you have the return pump, because that's typically your lowest level. And secondly, by pulling the return in, they can actually fit the water container for the automatic top-off. Now in the case of the water box, you will have to have the water container for fresh water somewhere else, but here on the Red Sea they can fit it. So I think it's like a trade-off. They're pulling the return a little bit in and then a little bit down, and they can fit the water container on the top, and that's, yeah, it is clever. Both of them use filter socks. I'm not the biggest fan of filter socks, but it's a different school, different parts of the world. It's a full flow filter sock on the water box and a partial flow on the Red Sea, and I think both works. Moving on, we'll focus on the filter compartment, and we will start talking about the water box. The water box has a clear 3-compartment filter chamber. First one being with the filter sock, and then there's what's typically referred to as a bubble trap, but to direct the flow, or to steer the flow, how it transports from first compartment into second compartment. The way a bubble trap works is that imagine you're pulling down some air bubbles in your surface skimmer. These air bubbles will be pulled down due to the momentum of the flow and friction, but the buoyancy forces will try to get them up to the surface. So the lower you get in the water column, the less bubbles you have. and depending on your balance between buoyancy and momentum of that flow, hopefully at the lowest part you have no bubbles. So that is where you're taking the inlet to the second compartment. It is in the lower part of the first compartment. And then if you have some bubbles, it's as clever to route it to the top of the second compartment, because then you minimize the risk of them transporting to the third. Another root cause of air bubbles is the protein skimmer. So it makes sense that, and typically you place it in the biggest compartment, which is in the water box, it's in the middle. So if you have air bubbles being released from the protein skimmer, they will also not, you will minimize, with this design, it will minimize the transportation to the third compartment. And the third compartment is the return. Saying that, I think skimmers, for instance, I think we had a lot more problems with micro bubbles or air bubbles 10-15 years ago. So I've actually come to expect that I expect when I buy a high quality skimmer that it will not release any air bubbles. So if I designed this compartment, I wouldn't use I wouldn't have used bubble traps. But saying that, I need to be a little bit humble, because here it's quite small aquarium and it's actually quite difficult to design skimmer that doesn't release air bubbles. So maybe actually it is quite wise to, when you consider how small skimmers we will fit to this compartment, that you actually have bubble traps. So I think it could be wise actually. And then so yeah, third compartment is the return. By the use of the water bubbles, and if you trace it, this is a very efficient layout. They are using the full momentum of the flow in all compartments, so there's a good flow through the full volume of the filter. So it's I think the water box has a good design. And if I take a step back, to me this is a classic all-in-one design of a filter compartment. It's almost a school book example for how to design it. So it will definitely do the job. But mentioning it's a school book example, that makes it more interesting to go to the Red Sea. And if we go to the Red Sea, actually they don't use any bubble traps. And I mark here with red once more the baffles. And I'm not sure if I should count the middle part as a bubble trap or a compartment. They are proposing to use it to place the filtration absorbent materials such as activated carbon or phosphate absorbents. So actually I think it is a compartment, but it's not a full compartment. So maybe 2.5 chambers is what we should count this one as. The first compartment, it houses the skimmer and a filter sock, and it's the biggest compartment. And given the fact that they choose a big surface skimmer, it makes sense to make this compartment also big and to house the skimmer. It's not a drawback, I think it's a benefit. The half compartment, it's housing the activated carbon and phosphate absorbing material, and the third one is the return. And I like the fact on the return that they're actually able to fit this clever automatic top-off unit, including the freshwater container. There's no bubble traps, similar to the water box, so that probably makes it a good idea to go with a Red Sea skimmer. And I would expect that one not to release any micro bubbles into the display at least. Or if you go for another aftermarket alternative, research it and see what other people's experience is. Probably someone's tried it before, tried to get hold of that one and what he or she thinks about how much trouble they had to tune it in and to have it release no micro bubbles. Look, and then yeah, now we talked a lot about micro bubbles, and I forgot to mention that in the beginning. Why micro bubbles isn't primarily dangerous to your inhabitants. So it's mostly aesthetics actually, that they look to be a little bit like particles in your display aquarium, but you want a crystal clear water, so you don't want water bubbles in the display. That's why I'm talking a lot about it, but that's why you don't want it. Now, looking at the Red Sea, actually, I get the impression that Red Sea actually spent a few hours engineering, maybe more than a few hours engineering this compartment to fit a lot of equipment. And I think it's a very clever design, very compact, and it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit novel. Yeah, two very interesting layout to think about and consider. Which actually brings me to my conclusions, because I would like to reinforce that both our aquariums, they use a well-planned filter chamber layout. There are differences between them, but differences in this context, I consider them small, judging from how they will impact your display area. And I think either aquarium will work and do an excellent job to support you on your reef. So that said, I mentioned in the beginning, this is one of my this is one of my passions within the hobby, to think about how to optimize the filtration. So if you have any comments or thoughts or things you want to speak up about, I mean, please speak up either in the commentary section or on the corresponding Facebook page, because I think your perspective maybe I think I can learn or think more about that to get more input. So with that said, I thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good day. Bye bye.